Today, VYAPT is a synonym of growth, and our growth series is a synonym of hope and possibilities in various industries the world would see ahead. Your narrative and our platform make an ideal match to serve the world and apprise them of the growth ahead. In an era of collaboration, we can grow together. In our Global Growth Series today, we have with us Mr. Ram Gopal, who is the CEO at Barclays Bank India. Welcome to Global Growth Series, Ram.
Thank you, Pankaj. Delighted to be able to join. This is a great initiative that you have come forth with. I'm glad to be part of it. Thank you so much.
So we start with our first curiosity, Ram, and you are aware of the happenings in the world and businesses in the last 3 quarters, where we have also witnessed a slump in economies. But what are the opportunities, if any, this crisis has created for your industry?
Thank you, Pankaj. That's a fantastic way to start. I think when you think about a situation which tests you, typically the reaction is how shall we protect ourselves through that incident or through that episode. I think you are talking about the positive aspects of such a crisis or such a situation. True. And I think first and foremost, it requires a mindset. I think I remember early on when all of these lockdowns were imposed, I think one of the things that we told ourselves is that we have to have an anti-fragile mindset compared to a resilient mindset. And I make this comparison because anti-fragile for us meant coming back from the stronger than we entered into it. And if you think about resilient, it was like, retaining, ensuring that, you're protected. So, for our industry, like many other sectors, this was, in many ways unprecedented. In fact, in my career, maybe I think one other episode I could recollect is the great financial crisis of 2007, 2008. But this was unprecedented in many ways. Opportunity-wise, there are 2 or 3 things that stood out. First and foremost is, one of the things that this pandemic, helped us realize is how fragile human lives are. And therefore, I think, one opportunity that we saw was we could redefine what we stood for. This was an opportunity to find out what parts of us work best and what parts of it doesn't, and gives us an opportunity to recreate or reinvent for ourselves what we stand for. So I thought that was a fantastic opportunity that the past 10, 12 months presented us. Coming to specifics, I think the first and the foremost, several people have talked about it, and maybe this is an echo again from me. I think one of the secular trends that we saw was adoption of digitization. I think in our industry as well, I think just the sheer take-up of digital channels for accessing financial services just grew exponentially. I think it was Satya Nadella, I think, who said way back in April 2020, where he said something like 2 years of transformation was accomplished in 2 months. I feel the same way. I think what we achieved in the last 10 months, I think has taken us, much further in than what the last decade has. So digitization is one key opportunity that is emerged. The second one is supply chain transformation. I think as we went through this exercise, and not just us, but our supplier partners, our supply chain participants, I think as they tried to cope with the challenge that was presented, I think we came to realize how important that just-in-time plus as a concept is. Just in time, we understand, I think these are, supply chain that you create in such a way that you are, shall I say, leveraging it for efficiency. What this said was efficiency is one dimension, but sometimes because disruptions are in some sense business as usual now, especially I think after the pandemic, I think this is one realization that these are, even though these are fat tail events, low probability, but it has high impact. Therefore, we have to think of something beyond, a supply chain that is just optimized for efficiency. I think customer impact, continuity of services is an important dimension, and how do we bring that into play, I think was another opportunity. I'll touch on the third one and the last one, and then we'll possibly move on. If there's more questions, we can speak about it. And the third one is, being close or staying close to clients. There are, different clients who've been impacted differently. If you think about clients in, let's say, the hospitality, travel, leisure, they've been, impacted in one way. If you look at, clients in some other sectors, say, for example, the pharma industry or the technology industry, they've been impacted differently. But it is by staying close to these clients, on both sides, do you realize how you can be relevant to them. On one side, this is about how do we create liquidity pools for them to carry on with their day-to-day business. On the other side, this is about trying to create a war chest for what they might try to build on their existing competencies. So staying close to the client and trying to be relevant in these tiring times was another big opportunity. I think these are the three things that I will pick up. First and foremost, the ability to reinvent the business. The second one is the digitization, supply chain reinvention, and the third one, or the last one, is very important. It encompasses all of these three, is opportunity to stay close to clients.
Okay. So, Ram, if you could tell our viewers, when you talk about, opportunity to be closer to your clients, what are some methods, which maybe your bank had adopted during these times to be in close with the kind of clients you have?
Yeah. So, Pankaj, this might, sound very simple, but essentially that is what it is. It is to understand how we might, and if you look at an institution like us, we intermediate flows between people who have capital and people who need capital. In the early stage, when liquidity completely was frozen, when the markets were very volatile, that was a scenario when we helped people raise capital from people who are providers of capital, typically the Western markets. And as we went through, and one must give full credit to RBI and the government, they took a series of steps. There was the support scheme for businesses. RBI cut interest rates. I think about 115 points. So they facilitated an environment where at some point in time, June, July, our clients were ready now to look at raising capital for furthering their businesses. So this is some example about how we, by staying close to the clients, help them depending upon what phase we were in. In the early phase, it is to how to navigate through volatility. In the later part, how they might build their balance sheet in terms of taking advantage of the situation. The assets, because there was such a risk premium, there were discount to valuations, and therefore somebody who has got a good, strong balance sheet, they have an ability to, let's say, do some inorganic acquisitions. So we helped, facilitate some of those.
So Ram, you talked about a lot of opportunities coming your way and to the segment as a whole. But how do you see the growth prospect in the industry in the next 3 quarters in India? And what are the transformations required to leverage the changing landscape?
Pankaj, I think we are talking about prospects, immediate prospects for our industry, just at the backdrop of what I think has been a truly progressive budget. There have been several announcements in the budget that impact our industry. One of the key things is about how do we start banks. I think one of the key things around the banking industry in India is about what is the credit to GDP ratio, and how for a economy that is aspiring to be 5 trillion, is this 50-60% credit to GDP ratio sufficient? And clearly it isn't. And one of the enablers for getting that credit to GDP growth is to get banks to lend And that was stunted in many ways because of, shall I say, some of the past excesses, non-performing assets that were in the bank's portfolio. And we are talking now after announcements have been made about not just recapitalizing some of the public sector banks, but also privatization and also making foreign investments possible. For example, the insurance sector, it has been opened up to 74%. So we as a country looking to grow will continue to depend on foreign capital. And the budget made several announcements around how, where, and how some of this are going to be made possible. So I see that as a huge opportunity overall for an industry. And it is also clearly the case that if you just look at the disruption itself, the pandemic itself, I think is, thankfully in India, the numbers seem to be coming down. The vaccination drive has, built its own momentum. And there are, depending upon who you talk to, people have got good 10 to 15% growth anticipation for, the FY 2021-22. So this is the backdrop in which we look at your question about what are the immediate opportunities. And I talk about two areas which, may not have got so much of attention, but I think is very important. One is the opportunity on green financing. India has put out a lot of investments on the, on developing, let's say, for example, on sustainable energy. If you look at, one aspect of it is, let's say, the solar energy plants. And if you look at the capacity that has been built out, even if you were to look at just a decade ago, this would have seemed improbable. I seem to think that this is a huge area of opportunity. If you look at some of the big investment houses in the Western world, I think there is focus on ESG investing, environmental, social, and governance related investing. I think that is a secular trend. I think by virtue of what we are looking to do here in India at the backdrop of what I call a very progressive budget, I think some of the capital flows will start getting unlocked. I think that's a huge opportunity for us. I think that's the first area that I want to touch on. The second area, and we spoke briefly about this in response to the previous question, and I think about this as portfolio restructuring. What I mean is that healthy companies have nurtured strong balance sheets in the last 10, 12 months. Now, as prospects become, unraveled, there are lots of potential for, augmenting, either it is capacity or augmenting businesses. And I think, people like us who intermediate between the capital providers and the capital recipients, I think are in a good position to facilitate these portfolio restructurings. So the strong companies want to go stronger. How do they retain their competitive advantage? It could be organic methods of growth, or it could be an M&A transaction. So, we as banks intermediate these, and I think that's a good opportunity in the next 3-4 quarters. Already in the US, you see deal activity specifically on the M&A pickup, and I'm hopeful that in India too, as businesses relook and take advantage of the opportunity that the macroeconomic situation presents itself, I think lots of opportunities for portfolio restructuring would happen, and we are in that right phase to be able to intermediate them. So these are two big initiatives that I think for all banks in the next 3-4 quarters.
Ram, you talked about growth and opportunities in the banking segment. But our common people just want to know from you, when there are so much of growth and opportunities coming in, what are the job prospects, maybe directly or indirectly, these growth and opportunities are going to create for them?
And I think, Pankaj, that is so true, right? I mean, if you think about the impact from the pandemic, this has, and we say that every crisis exacerbates one's weakness. So some of the income inequality that existed perhaps has gotten more pronounced, right? The strong have gone stronger and the weak have possibly become poorer. And, so the question that you ask is very relevant about, there's so much talk about hope, growth, etc. How does that impact the common man? I'm very bullish on that account, and specifically for our industry. I think, for everything that I mentioned as opportunities, I seem to think that, the quarters that will unfold will have a positive impact on generating employment. There's one trend that I want to just pick up and play to you and the audience. This is about entrepreneurship, and one of the things that one has noticed is through the 10 12 months, one of the things that has gotten a big boost is entrepreneurial effort. And if you look at, I think it was some McKinsey research that I was reviewing, in the last quarter, in the US alone, there were 1.9 new businesses that were registered. And that review had some other markets, Germany, Japan, Britain, somewhere in between, because they also had to navigate through Brexit. I don't have India stats, but I can be, if you just look at your own social circle, there are so many cases of people who have said that this is, they want much more from their life, right? So they have gone towards trying to build, capabilities on their own side. And I am very positive that that is a secular trend. And therefore, the overall prospects for employment, be it not just driven by organizations like us, but also from first-time entrepreneurs, I think that is to take off. So I'm, on the topic of jobs and unemployment, I would be very bullish, Pankaj.
Ram, when you said this, do you also mean that the gig economy is going to expand further?
Yeah, so you talk about coming at it from on the gig economy side. I think we have to possibly make one transition, and we talk about gig economy, which is about, if you think about resilience or anti-fragile character. One of the things that the businesses have realized is that ultimately it is dependent upon the anti-fragility or the resilient characteristics of their staff. Right? And therefore, if you look at staff, there are many things one can speak about, which is one, through the crisis, we spoke about this, it has exposed to human frailties. And therefore, people want more out of their employer. They want to know, what do they stand for? What does their 12-hour, 14-hour, 15-hour day translate into? What does it translate to the community around them? So they are asking tough questions of their employers. And the other dimension is about skilling, as as is the case, and we spoke about the case for digitization earlier. As things progressively move towards the online environment, I think it requires reskilling, upskilling of the employee base. And to your question, I think this reskilling, upskilling is so important that in some sense, I would think that the future of work is almost here. It is here in the now. So if businesses have learned one lesson out of the pandemic, is that their success through a crisis like this, which now seems to be, even though it is low probability, because of its high impact, one needs to consider that as, business as usual. That requires a resilient workforce, that requires reskilling, and therefore it comes to your question about, how do we think about reskilling, retooling in this new normal. So I think one aspect of jobs is job creation. The other aspect of jobs is about upskilling, reskilling to be able to do the new jobs of tomorrow. It's possibly a fad if I talked about AI, machine learning, robotic process automation, etc. People will have to take that in their stride. It is only at the back of those productivity gains can we really become the 5 trillion economy that we aspire to. That's my belief.
Ram, so you talked about the kind of job prospects this is going to create, and you also talked about that reskilling and upskilling is very, very important, and that's the only reason economy can come up, and the gig economy is going to flourish across the world because of the many reasons and many things which is going in favor of gig economy. So my fourth question goes to you as a leader, and our viewers want to know from you that how do you ensure that our desire to grow remains untouched even in the toughest circumstances. And many of us seen, including me, that 2020 has been the toughest year ever we have been on this planet.
Yeah, Pankaj, I think that's a very philosophical question as well, right? And one can look at that from many perspectives, and maybe a couple perspectives I'll offer, Pankaj, and maybe you could add to that from your own experience. I think the one aspect of trying to stay resilient is knowing that our efforts matter, right? Purpose or meaning. And we spoke about that in the previous question about how not just me, but everyone is asking of their companies as to whether all of this adds up. So I think this has resulted in a search for a more purposeful organization. And I think if you answer the question, this is the famous Simon Sinek question, right? If you can understand the why of any human endeavor, that makes it, self-fulfilling as well, right? So, I do this because, and if I can answer that categorically, then that gives me more power, that gives me more energy to want to come and, take some of these hits from time to time and stand up and look for the next best day or next day to do my best again. So one is the purpose dimension of it and how that is important if you want to stay resilient. This has to be absolutely center of what you want to do. And the second aspect is a little bit about, habit formation. And I say that because if you think about one of the key aspects, and this is again research, this is on happiness. And, they found that the equation, this gentleman is somebody, Arthur C. Brooks. He's written about the 3 equations for happiness. And, one aspect of it is about how habits, are so important if we want to create a sense of, a well-being. And he talks about this as, there are certain things about in your genes, your predisposition about being satisfied with your circumstances. But those are factors which you may not have too much in control. But what you can control directly are your habits. And I would think that, whether it is about finding time to reflect, finding time to realize where you are in terms of where you want to go, in terms of making small steps about what changes you want in any aspects of your life. It could be on work, it could be on your spiritual quotient, it could be on, physical quotient, physical health, it could be on many dimensions, on relationships, it could be on any dimension. But, being intentional about taking concrete small steps, I think is going to be very important if one wants to stay resilient. So I would think the way to answer the question of what can you do to stay resilient is, I would say, think or reflect upon the purpose. And the second one is reflect on what habits you have to get you to that purpose or into that endeavor that takes you to that purpose. I think that's how I would think about it.
So Ram, you talked about inculcating habits which goes around the purpose which you built for yourself is the key to success, and that's how Ram has been able to build his own career so far. And we all wish you all the best, Ram, in all the endeavors you take forward. Thank you so much for being a part of Global Growth Series. It was really very inspirational talking to you and hear your heart and mind talks.
Thank you so much, Pankaj. This is a great platform. I wish you the very, very best. And to all your viewers, I hope you all have a cracking 21. Thank you so much.